Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Surfer's Library. I'm Billy Jack, your guide through the pages of surf history, culture, and legend. Today, we're jumping back into The Way of the Surfer by Drew Kampion, reading The Stylist, Country Livin' with Bill Hamilton. Now, I'm a big Bill Hamilton fan, so I'm especially stoked to bring you this one. If you've been around surfing for a while, you know that he's more than just Laird's dad. Bill Hamilton is a legend and one of the most stylish surfers of the 60s and 70s. I mean, his signature board was called the Stylist. And if you don't believe me, just go back and watch a couple of classic surf flicks like Free and Easy or The Sunshine Sea. It'll become apparent real quick. In this chapter, Hamilton comes through as more than a surfer. He's a thinker who sees riding waves as a mental and spiritual discipline, pushing past fear to become one with the ocean. Kampion explores his total commitment to life and surfing, his ability to adapt through the shortboard revolution, and his identity as both an artist and a fiercely independent spirit, capturing someone who truly lived the idea that surfing isn't just something you do, it's a way of being. So let's paddle out and get to know Bill Hamilton a little bit better. The Stylist, Country Livin' with Bill Hamilton. Past the back entrance into Princeville on the north shore of Kauai, near Honolulu, the pavement stops and the road goes dark as it burrows into the mango and hau trees. Down about a half mile, I come to a lone gray, windowless and unmarked building and park the car. Stepping out into the cool, mosquito-rich morning, the air is filled with the sweet and sour tropic aromas and the familiar buzzing shriek of a planer. The door is open. Inside, the small building is divided into 3 or 4 rooms. In one of them, I find a masked John Rogers laying up fiberglass on one of Bill Hamilton's patented fabric-railed longboards. In the next room, I find Hamilton himself, in paper mask and foam dust, shaping a shortboard for one of his team riders. He glances up, shuts off the planer, pulls off the mask, and flashes a big grin. I haven't seen much of Hamilton since the early 1970s when he was living on the North Shore, right at Pipeline, and then here on Kauai. At the time, I regarded him as one of the most impressive surfers in the world, having pulled off a seamless transition from great longboard stylist to great shortboard stylist, a feat about as rare as silent movie stars making it into the talkies. In fact, surfing a shortboard exposed Hamilton for what he really was, a very radical guy disguised as one of the sport's more genial and easygoing gentlemen. The North Shore seemed to bring out the wild man in Hamilton, the competitor too. He placed 9th in the '69 Duke Kahanamoku Invitational, then 6th in '70, and 2nd in '71, when he was runner-up at the Smirnoff Pro-Am too. All events held at Sunset Beach, a spot he loved. He was also a more than credible performer in the expression sessions of '70 and '71 at Pipeline. But just when a serious professional career started to seem like a viable option, he pulled up stakes and moved here to Kauai. By '73, he and his wife Joanne and their 2 blonde-haired boys, Laird and Lion, were living in a little tin-roofed house alongside the road in the idyllic but dangerous nowhere land beyond Honolulu Bay. He seemed stoked at the time, shaping a few boards, growing some herb, surfing uncrowded waves, enjoying a simple, relatively solitary life. In those years, his independent and adventurous spirit found voice in a poetic sensibility, which seemed to flow from a visionary but common-sense philosophy. I enjoyed reading the occasional piece by him in Surfer magazine. Now he tours me through his shop: glassing room, sanding room, finish room, shaping room, and a front room, with stacks of finished surfboards, tow boards, the odd surf ski, and a small dusty office corner. The walls are covered with surf photos, stickers, letters from customers, phone numbers, job orders, and assorted memorabilia. One of the largest and most impressive images depicts his stepson Laird riding a pornographically huge wave at a spot on Maui called Jaws. The story of his meeting with Laird is a true myth. After enjoying some spontaneous ocean play together in small waves near Hamilton's house, 2-year-old Laird walked up to him and announced, "I want you to be my daddy," then took him by the hand and led him to his mother. Curiously, that first encounter with Laird presaged an uncanny replay of his own youth in the idyllic South Laguna beach of the 1950s. A double-track dirt drive, slick with wet leaves, rotting fruit, and the henna-red mud for which Kauai is so famous, leads down to the small house Hamilton shares with his wife, Rhonda. Off to one side, ramshackle structures shelter an assortment of lumber, bikes, car and boat parts, junk, surfboard blanks, and a foliage-covered 65 International truck, a future restoration project. A few steps across the lawn is the languid green water of the Hanalei River, which flows down from the misty mountain crags in veins of silver. There's a small gazebo there with a few chairs, a fine Spanish guitar, and a set of weights. That's where we sit in the afternoon shade and talk about Hamilton's life. His father had an orchestra and played in ballrooms across the country in the 1930s and 50s. His mother was a watercolorist and a cello player who came to the marriage with an infant son, Gordon. They moved west, where William Stewart Hamilton was born in August of 1948, and lived in South Laguna, a paradise on earth in those days. The beach between 8th and 11th Streets was a playground for Hamilton and his older, more world-wise stepbrother, and there was plenty of adventure in the coastal canyons, too. Tagging along with Gordon, he learned to hunt, fish, scavenge, and forage on Laguna's richly populated reefs. Gordon later became a Hell's Angel. Along with everything else, he taught his brother how to defend himself. Hamilton liked hunting octopus at low tide. You'd find him in the holes in the flat part of the reef, he says. I'd reach into the hole, let the octopus grab me, and pull him out. But this one time I reached in and it grabbed me, and I tried to pull it out, but it wouldn't come. And it wasn't letting go, and the tide was coming up. His tentacles had gone up my arm, and they're holding me, and I can't get away. I'm really scared. The tide's up to my chin. I'm going to drown, and then I relax, and the thing lets go of me. Art and celebrity were part of their Laguna Beach community. Rock Hudson would bring his boyfriend down and they'd oil each other all over, Hamilton laughs. And that old Sterling Holloway, who wrote Somewhere Over the Rainbow, he had a house right above my house. Two visitors from La Jolla introduced Hamilton to the wonders of flamenco guitar. Even before high school, the boy had been strongly influenced by Dale Carnegie's The Power of Positive Thinking and Thoreau's poems on man and nature. I was interested in religion when I was younger, he says. Religion in the sense of meditation. In the mid-50s, Hamilton came into the orbit of Dick Petite and Joyce Van Avery, an athletic and rather bohemian couple. They were young, vibrant people who had an A-frame on the beach. It was just like Tahiti in the summertime. They had a palapa and a Tahitian bungalow. There was always a hammock. She painted Popeye cartoons, and he worked for a fiberglass company. They were water people too, and Hamilton spent countless days with them, swimming and diving, fishing and riding waves. Joyce became Hamilton's surrogate mother. She was absolutely gorgeous, he says. I had a huge crush on her. He bought his first surfboard from Van Avery in '59, a blue Hobie. The following year, Petite and Van Avery started taking him on surf trips, Dana Point, Baja, and sometimes up to Rincon. He rode waves with the great surfers of the day, Dora, Edwards, and Van Artsdalen, in addition to Mike Doyle, L.J. Richards, Johnny Fain, Skip Fry, the Patterson brothers, and more. He attempted to integrate what he had learned from them into his surfing. What emerged was a style with its own artful panache. His own buddies, including Corky Carroll, Herbie Torrens, and Mark Martinson, jokingly characterized Hamilton's surfing as a stand tall and do nothing at all. But the guys taking pictures for the magazines knew the art was in the subtleties and found him an attractive subject. By '63, he was a member of the prestigious Wind and Sea Surf Club and traveled with the team to the '64 Makaha Surfing Championships, where he encountered the first big waves of his life and was plucked from the rip, and likely from drowning by the Hawaiian beach boy, Blue Makua. Back on the mainland, he got a job at Cabell's newly opened Chart House restaurant in Newport Beach and found himself right in the middle of the thriving '60s California surf scene. He got into weed, then tried LSD. Surfers being thrill seekers, we were virtually taking off on a big wave. He recalls surfing under the influence. I sat on my surfboard feeling the ocean going up through my spine and bathing my head with this warmth. I would say that if there was a benefit from any of that, of the psychedelic era, it was that it opened our Western minds to Eastern forms of thought and belief and philosophy and a real interesting kind of thinking. Convinced that it was the surfing life for him, Hamilton graduated from high school in June of '66 and moved straight to Hawaii. I had been voted the 5th best surfer in the world that year in the Surfer magazine poll, he chuckles, shaking his head. But that amounted to jack shit the first time I paddled out at Sunset Beach and got my white little butt kicked all the way back to the beach. Like everyone else, he paid his dues and climbed the ladder, sharing the greatest waves in the known world, the North Shore's 7-mile miracle, with the likes of accomplished watermen, awesome swimmers, divers, and big wave riders like Peter Cole, Jose Angel, Kimo Hollinger, Ricky Grigg, Warren Harlow, Kealoha Keo, Buzzy Trent, and Tiger Asper. His peers were Jock Sutherland, Jeff Hackman, Barry Kanayapuni, Jerry Lopez, Reno Abelera, and the truly great big wave rider of our generation, Eddie Aikau. Hamilton's life always seemed to flow along special lines of fate and serendipity. His good looks and photogenic surfing style caught the attention of Laguna Beach cinematographers Greg McGilvery and Jim Freeman in Hawaii shooting their film Free and Easy, and they signed him to co-star with Martinson, a hot competitive surfer from Long Beach. A pairing of opposites, the two became great friends during the filming on Oahu and then Kauai. Actually, Bill admits, all of Free and Easy is me on acid. I was eating that stuff like candy. Greg didn't notice, but Mark, you could see it in the film. I was like, yeah, whatever. And Mark was this little bulldog. He'd be drinking his rum and coke, and I'd be smoking and taking Lysergic. That was the winter of 1966-1967, when Kauai was still relatively untouched by development. It was like coming back into a time warp, Hamilton recalls with a grin. There was a handful of guys that surfed out here at Hanalei regularly, but the whole time we were here, we never saw anybody. Although he lived in Oahu for another 5 years, the Garden Isle haunted him. In the back of my mind, I always knew I wanted to live here on Kauai. It was around this time that Hamilton met Laird and Joanne, who were part of the McGilvery-Freeman entourage. Laird, not yet 3, was fatherless, and Joanne was 5 years older than Hamilton. But there was something fate-filled about their encounter. We all fell in love, he says. I was 19 years old, thinking it all out, making the decision to do this. Hamilton and Joanne were married in February of '67. They lived on the North Shore, right at Pipeline, for a couple of years, while he nursed a pro surfing career as a Surfboards Hawaii team rider and got a planer and took a crash course in shaping. His surfboard model was called the Stylist. He hit the road again for McGilvery-Freeman's next film, Waves of Change, which took him and Martinson on to France, Spain, Portugal, Puerto Rico, and New York City, where he met the great waterman Johnny Tarzan Weissmuller in an elevator at the Johnny Carson show. A year later, he had a key role in Severson's opus Pacific Vibrations. About then, a young surfer named Bunker Spreckles was making an impression in the powerful North Shore surf with his strange little boards and committed surfing. He was living up in the hills in a World War II bunker, fittingly. He'd come down early in the morning to surf at Pipeline, then take a shower at the Hamiltons and fall into Laird's playpen for a nap. Suddenly, this homeless surfer, who turned out to be the stepson of film actor Clark Gable, inherited the Spreckles sugar fortune and moved from the bunker to a house on Kauai, where he soon became bored and invited Hamilton to come over and play. You have to understand, I was a little kid that grew up pretty much alone on this huge beach in Laguna in the '50s, and coming to Kauai was like coming back home. I loved it, Hamilton says. So he moved his family, including newborn Lion, to relatively primitive living conditions on Kauai. It was a profound experience for all of us, he readily admits. Really, the inner relationship of being a white person here in an area where it was predominantly local, it was really interesting. Hamilton is a great storyteller. His depiction of accents, especially local pidgin, is nonpareil, and so you tend to hang on every word. In the '70s, a few families controlled things out here. It was a reign of terror, of intimidation, rape and pillage, you name it. Now it's referred to as the blue truck era because they all drove these blue pickup trucks with chrome rims and big studded tires. It was a period known for its local hostility, and that's where Kauai got its bad reputation. So one day, Lion comes home from school with a bloody nose, and Hamilton wants to know who did it. And Lion says it had been two bigger kids, brothers in the dominant blue truck family. Hamilton tells Laird, who is now a big kid and has weathered plenty of his own storms in the local schools, to look into it. Laird confronts the bullies, who run to their father, the baddest of the bad. A message comes back to Hamilton. The father wants to see him at 3 o'clock. He goes immediately, showing up at the guy's place before lunch. There are several sizable clan members around, and the father says, "I thought I told you 3 o'clock." And Hamilton says, "I don't work for you, and I don't do what you say. If you want to talk, let's talk now." The father becomes threatening, and the others crowd around him. But Hamilton shows no fear and points out that such a big, bad man shouldn't need help. So the father punches out the time clock. "Come with me, Hamilton," he says, and heads off into the woods. As soon as they're into the trees, Hamilton pulls him around. "We can take care of everything right here," he says. They square off, and the father pulls out a big knife. True to his training from Brother Gordon, Hamilton peels off his t-shirt, wraps it around his hand, and says, "Okay, let's go." Seeing the Howleys' level of preparedness, the father reconsiders the situation and puts away the knife. "Hey, Hamilton," he says, "this should be between the kids, eh?" And Hamilton says, "Not when it's two big kids on one little kid. I don't want my boy getting beat up anymore, understand?" And the father concedes, "Okay, brah, I talk with him, eh?" From then on, Hamilton was given a greater measure of respect and a wider berth. Kauai was a tough place to eke out a living for a family of 4, and periodic movie work wasn't going to do the job. At one point, he did stunt work and doubled for actor Jan Michael Vincent in John Milius's Big Wednesday. So Hamilton scraped together enough cash to buy a used 12-foot boat and some gear and got into fishing and into trouble. I left early one morning and went up past Kilauea Lighthouse, about a 4-mile run. I got into chasing the birds around, so I went out, and it was a beautiful day. I wasn't thinking, obviously, but I was new to this whole deal. Then I was getting kind of low on fuel, so I turned for home. I was coming into Honolulu, about 2 miles out, and he ran out of gas. No problem, he thought, and fired up the spare engine, a little Seagull. It carried a quart of gas, usually an hour's worth, but there was a strong current running, and the wind was pushing the boat sideways. He made very little progress by the time he ran out of gas again. "I don't have any oars. I don't have any fins. I have nothing," he recounts. So I jump overboard with a line attached to the boat, and I swim for 3 hours without stopping, and I'm further out in the ocean than when I started. By the time he crawled back into the boat, the sun was lowering towards sunset, and he drifted down off the remote Nepali coast. "Next stop's Niihau," he continues. "If I miss Niihau, I'm going to Tahiti. I've caught one fish, about 20 pounds, and no water. I have a t-shirt, trunks, and that's it. It's looking pretty grim, and by now I'm about 5 miles out." It was too far to swim in that current. Besides, you always stay with your boat, but the sun was sinking lower. I was getting pretty scared. Reality was setting in. I was thinking about Laird and Lion and Joanne and how they're going to start to get worried, and nobody knows really where I went. I didn't have a float plan. I was surveying all the things I didn't do right, and I was going, wow. So I just sat for a minute. I put my head down and prayed. I said, "Jesus, you say ask and ye shall receive, and I am asking you with all my life to help me." Suddenly, he realized he had a couple of sticks of bamboo used for spreading the fishing lines out from the boat so they don't get tangled. He tied his blue t-shirt on one of them and started waving it back and forth. I did that for about an hour, and the sun's setting, it's getting dark, and out of nowhere, and this is 1976, and nobody was out there in those days. There was a fishing boat coming up from Nepali, and a sailboat too, and they both converged on me at the same time. He laughs with a revisited relief. "That was the one time when I ever really prayed for my life," he says, the stutter a clue to the intensity of the memory, "because I knew I was a dead duck." He had a few decent years of fishing and then a few excellent ones. Even so, Joanne soon tired of the remote, pressurized existence and moved back to Oahu. They divorced in '77. 4 years later, in an accidental meeting, he found his soulmate in Rhonda Ramers, who had been a family friend, a babysitter to Laird and Lion years earlier. Now, Laird and Lion were big, grown men, and Laird had become arguably the most astounding surfer on the planet, the first guy to be towed into the giant outer reef waves of Jaws. Lion was the fourth. This unridden realm became the new terrain of surfing's new millennium. In the early '90s, Laird, Buzzy Kerbox, Derek Dorner, and Jerry Lopez began experimenting with slingshotting one another into 4- and 5-story waves, using tow lines behind jet skis like water skiers. With this jet-assisted takeoff, they could get into the swells early and with enough speed to make it down the face to ride and survive bigger waves than anything previously attempted. Somebody once wrote that big wave riders are born and not made, Hamilton says. I don't know who said it, but it's really true. It takes a certain kind of psyche to really enjoy that. In recent years, Hamilton spent some time with Laird and his fellow tow-in pioneers at the outer reef spots. He's seen them ride those monster waves. He's built boards for them, and he's even done a little smaller scale towing in himself. So he knows what he's talking about when he says they don't do it for any other reason other than that they really do love it. I've seen Laird and Derek go out alone when it's humongo, and they don't care. They're going to these phantom places that you don't even see. There's nobody to watch them. They're doing it for their own love of it. They push the envelope and they push the adrenaline button. They like the high they're getting from doing that. It's an extreme place to be, and they have tempered themselves to face these big destructive forces, to ride on top of them and be comfortable with them, and it's really become their own personal sport. They have that spirit, that gladiator spirit. I mentioned the parallels between his stepbrother Gordon and Laird, how they both had that warrior psyche. I find the whole symmetry of the entire connection, the parallels are absolutely mind-boggling, Hamilton admits. Just the fact that I had a father who was a stepfather, who had a son, Gordon, who was my half-brother, who was really a lot like Laird, who was my stepson and stepbrother to my son. It's also fascinating to me. He pauses, considers, then continues. My father did a lousy job with my brother. He was an abusive stepfather. To me, it was so unfair. It really was. So when I became Laird's father, if anything, I became the opposite of my father by making Laird's life more. I was disciplined with Laird, and I was stern with Laird, but I was never cruel to Laird, and I was never jealous. I think that was one of the reasons I was so willing to take on Laird at a young age, because of that injustice that I saw in some unknown depth of me. The deep-throated sounds of the jet boat's twin engines rumble up from the river. There's a good hour to go before sunset, an hour and a half till it's dark. Hamilton is standing in Laird's 16-foot-long camouflaged Yamaha Exciter, the one he uses to tow in at the island's other outer reef spots. The 5 seats are made of inflated rubber, and there are handholds in a few strategic places, but none for the passenger in the middle rear, which is where I sit, next to the driver's seat. It's my last night on the island, and Hamilton's taking me for a spin. Hey son, can I borrow the keys to the car? He jokes. Laird keeps the boat and his camouflaged jet ski 100 yards upstream in a small cul-de-sac below the land he recently purchased. He's been clearing away the how and mango for a house. In the meantime, when he's off island, well. As we tool slowly down the Green River, it feels like we're somewhere in Southeast Asia. Hamilton's voice is low as he talks about Laird and surfing and his life as a series of miracles. History repeats itself. The cycles always kind of glance off each other as they come around full circle. It's like the longboard thing, which we thought was a lost art. Then it came back in and rejuvenated the surfboard industry, brought back a lot of our roots and our history. Every generation should be aware of the great lineage that we travel in. I mean, we're surfers, you know? I'm proud to be a surfer. I've been a student of the game for so long, and in a real pure sense, I love to surf. And I love everything that surfing has done for my life in the sense of where I live. I mean, look at this place where I live. This is a beautiful environment, and I'm here because I love to surf. I'm one of the rare people in the world that gets to do something that they love for work. And when I'm in the water, I see it put a smile on somebody's face. That's a gift. It really is. The jet boat clears the river mouth, and Hamilton taxis it slowly out along the reef at Honolulu until we're well out beyond the pier and beyond the boats anchored nearer shore. Then he throws back the throttle and blasts across the bay like a maniac, heading toward Lumahai at the opposite end of the big bay. When we get there, he strafes the beach, expertly whips the thing into a 180, then vaults back across the bay, leaping the boat from swell to swell until we reach the nondescript patch of water about a mile off the point at Princeville. He eases off the throttle and trolls around. "This is where we were riding the boat last Memorial Day," he says. "That was something. It was about 60 feet deep here. The waves had 100-foot faces. Whew." Today, it's only a foot or two, but as he turns back towards Honolulu, one of the engines goes completely dead, and the other begins to sputter. Soon we're making only intermittent progress, less than a mile an hour, and I start to measure the swim I seem about to make. I can't help but notice the sun is setting. "Good thing it's not as big as it was last time I was out here," he says, flashing that big Hamilton grin. "If it was, we'd be dead." And that is going to bring us to the end of this chapter from The Way of the Surfer by Drew Kampion, featuring the one and only Bill Hamilton. I really love this chapter as, for me at least, it's a reminder that surfing can be much more than just the act of riding waves. It can be a mental and spiritual discipline and a path towards becoming one with nature. I know that sounds a bit hippie, but I'm feeling it right now. Bill Hamilton's total commitment to both life and surfing, his ability to evolve through the times of change, and his identity as an artist and independent thinker all paint the picture of someone who truly lived surfing as a way of being. I really hope you enjoyed this chapter. If you did, consider sharing the podcast with a friend who loves surfing, surf culture, or just a good story from the past. If you'd like to help support the podcast, you can always do so by visiting buymeacoffee.com/The Surfer's Library. Your support helps cover the platform fees that keep the show going each month, so any little bit helps. Also, if you'd like to sponsor the podcast or have any story ideas or feedback for us, please contact us on Instagram or at thesurferslibrary@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. And so as always, I'd like to thank you for tuning in, and until next time, keep your toes on the nose, your stoke high, and always, always, always support your local surf shop. I'll see you in the lineup. The author of today's story is Drew Kampion, former editor of Surfer, Surfing, Windsurf, and Wind Tracks magazines. He was editorial director for the Patagonia Clothing Company and associate editor for New Age Journal. He founded, published, and edited the Island Independent, an award-winning bioregional magazine in newsprint serving the maritime rain shadow islands of Washington State. For his work with the Independent, he received first prize for editing a periodical with a circulation under 50,000. Until recently, Drew was the American editor of The Surfer's Path, the world's first green surf magazine. His episodic parody, The Teachings of Don Redondo, A Surfer's Way of Knowledge, as illustrated by artist Tom Theron, was a regular feature of the magazine. Drew is the author of The Book of Waves, The Art of Christian Reese Lassen, Stoked, A History of Surf Culture, The Way of the Surfer, The Lost Coast, Waves, From Surfing to Tsunami, Dora Lives, The Authorized Story of Mickey Dora, and Greg Knoll, The Art of the Surfboard. He was also editor of The Storm Rider Guide to North America. He is currently assisting Fernando Aguirre with his autobiography, Surf, Sex, and Sandals, The Latin Art of Mixing Business with Pleasure, and is at work on completing the story of Jack O'Neill, the inventor of the modern surfing wetsuit. Jack O'Neill, It's Always Summer on the Inside. Married with 2 children, Drew lives on an island in Washington State.